Good morning, students. In today's class, we are going to talk about a story prescribed in your syllabus, A Rose for Emily. In the earlier classes, we had been talking about essays. We have completed 4 essays prescribed in your syllabus: Selected Snobberies, On Superstitions, My Wood, and one more essay, The First Snow. Today, we are going to take a story which we had taken in our earlier classes. Now, the story that we pick up today is the story titled A Rose for Emily, written by an American writer, William Faulkner. To tell you a little bit about William Faulkner was an American writer and a Nobel Prize laureate from Oxford University. He was a novelist, short story writer, essayist, has written a number of poems and many other things. The story which is prescribed in the syllabus, A Rose for Emily, is divided into 5 sections. Out of all the stories prescribed in your syllabus, A Rose for Emily is, according to me, is one of the stories which has the most difficult vocabulary and sentence structure. Vocabulary in the sense because there are certain words which are not easily comprehensible to the students, and the students might need to consult a dictionary for that. But since we are not analyzing the text line to line, we are just going to take up the summary of the entire story, and the few important details would be discussed in the class. First, let me give you a brief analysis of the story. Now, for your convenience, we can divide the story into 5 sections. The story divided into 5 sections, in which section 1 comprises of the time of Emily Greason's death. Please remember, in the story we have 3 characters, and mainly we are just referring to one single character, that is the women character, who's named as Miss Emily Greason. The second male character that we refer to in the story is Homer Barron, and the third character whom we refer to in the story is the father of Miss Emily Greason. The father is presumed dead in the story. Homer Barron is the only male character which has any kind of interaction with the female character, Miss Emily Greason. Now, when we talk about section 1, the section 1 of the story begins with the time of Emily Greason's death. The story begins when Emily Greason is dead, Miss Emily Greason to be very precise. And since she is dead, there are a number of people attending the funeral. 2 categories, men and women. Men are attending the funeral because of respectful affection for a fallen monument, and the women out of curiosity. So Emily Greason's death again is a phenomena for the people of the town, and both men and women attended, men because of the respectful affection for a fallen monument, and women because of curiosity. Why because of curiosity? Because it is believed that when Miss Emily Greason was alive, nobody could visit her house. Not a single member of the community where she lived, not a single person of that entire area which she lived was allowed entry into the house. There was only the servant who could move inside and outside to collect the items, the groceries and other things for the household. Rest, nobody else was invited inside the house, and nobody knew what was inside the house. So when Emily Greason dies, women are curious as to what is there inside the house, and they come to attend the funeral because of that curiosity. Now, once we begin the story, the description of why men and women attend the funeral for different reasons, we move further, and then we are acquainted with the large house in which Emily Greason lived. It has been explained with number of high-sounding words, that it has a lot of spires and scrolled balconies, and it was a huge building and a very attractive one. And then further, we come to know that Miss Emily Greason had been a tradition, a duty and a care. It is believed that because of some help from her father, because of her father paying the dues for somebody, Emily's father was exempted of the taxes they were supposed to pay. So when the person who was responsible for releasing or relieving the tax burden of the father of Miss Emily Greason, when he passed away, another generation came. And when another generation came, they held a meeting, and the meeting was for the purpose that they should ask Emily Greason to pay the taxes which her father had not paid for many years. Now a meeting was called, and the mayor had written a letter to be sent to Emily Greason so that she could reply as to why she was not paying the taxes. The letter was sent to Emily Greason, and then it was returned without any comment. Once this process happened, the meeting was called again, and it was decided that somebody would go to her house, and that person would inquire from Emily Greason as to why she was not paying the taxes. Anybody who had gone inside her house or who had visited her house was some way back 10 years earlier. When the person from that particular meeting, a person from the community, a person from a resource enters into the house, he is admitted into the house by a Negro who leads him into the dim hall and then into the parlor. The description of the room is given that the room is covered with heavy leather furniture, and on a tarnished gilt easel there is a portrait of Miss Emily's father. So the man who's supposed to interact with Emily for the tax notices that she had been receiving and she's not been responding to them, the man is sitting waiting for Emily to enter, and when Emily enters, he gets up. And the writer has given you a very realistic description of how Emily looked. To take lines from the text, he says, Miss Emily was a small, fat woman in black with a thin gold chain descending to her waist and vanishing into her belt. She was leaning on an ebony cane with a tarnished gold head. She had a little plumpness, fatty ridges on her face, and her eyes looked like two pieces of coal pressed into a lump of dough as they moved from one face to another while the visitors stated their errand. So this is how Faulkner describes Emily, that she was a petite figure, a small woman, and the description is given to them. When Emily interacts with these men face to face, she does not ask them to sit. She just stands at the door, listens quietly what the spokesman says, and then there is so much of silence in the room that one could hear the clock ticking. Her voice is dry and very cold, and she utters a sentence, "I have no taxes in Jefferson. Perhaps one of you can gain access to the records of the city and satisfy yourself." So when the tax people go to Emily Greason to inquire about why is she not paying the taxes, they are led into a house which is very dim, not properly lit. You are given the description of the lady of the house, the main character of the story. And the only reply that she gives to these tax people is that she doesn't own any taxes to the Jefferson, and if they have any problem regarding these taxes, they have to go and inquire into the state records and verify. She says, "I received a paper." "Yes," Miss Emily said. "Perhaps he considered himself the sheriff. I have no taxes in Jefferson." So Emily admits that she does receive the notices and the letters from the office, but she says that I don't have any taxes in Jefferson. And then when section 1 finishes, she again repeats that she has no taxes in Jefferson. She calls the Negro and then she says, "Show these gentlemen out." So this is the first section in which Faulkner has given you a description beginning with the death of Emily Greason, why she remains a curious figure, why her funeral is supposed to be a very curious meeting place of both men and women, and then the story proceeds further as to what is the background of Miss Emily Greason. It is believed that Miss Emily Greason lived with her father in that town, and she had spent most of her life in that particular town, the entire life. And the story, if you just take it up in 4 or 5 sentences, reveal that Miss Emily Greason had never married in her life. Why she hadn't married? Because owing to her father. Because at the time when she was young and beautiful and ready for marriage, her father had rejected many suitors, and hence there was nobody to marry. And when the time passed, simply there was nobody available. So Miss Emily Greason remained unmarried throughout her life. What happens next in the story? What happens in section number 2, 3 and 4? Because the story is full of curiosity. When you finish with section 1, where the writer says that Emily Greason refuses any tax, you are curious enough to know what happens to the other things. So in tomorrow's class, we will pick up where we left in section 1. And we will proceed with the story slowly, because this happens to be a difficult story. And since it is a difficult story in terms of sentence structure and vocabulary, we ought to take it a little slowly. So in tomorrow's class, we will pick up section 2 of the story and take the story further. Thank you.